Every October 31st, my town hosts a Halloween parade. Sounds normal, right? Think again. Beneath the cheerful facades and flickering jack-o'-lanterns lies a chilling truth. This parade is not for us. It is for something else, and we are just playing by its ancient, horrifying rules. You will not believe what I witnessed. My name is Reed, and I am 23 years old. I have lived in Millbrook Falls my entire life, a small town nestled in the heart of rural Vermont where everyone knows everyone, and secrets are supposedly impossible to keep. But there is one secret that everyone keeps together, a collective silence so profound that it becomes part of the town's very foundation. That secret is the Halloween parade. Millbrook Falls is the kind of place you see on postcards. Our main street is lined with brick buildings from the 1800s, each one meticulously maintained with historical plaques that tourists stop to photograph. In October, the town transforms into something that belongs in a painting. Maple trees explode into shades of crimson and gold, their leaves carpeting the sidewalks in a crunchy blanket that children love to kick through on their way to school. The air smells like wood smoke and cinnamon. Every porch displays carved pumpkins, some smiling, some grotesque, their candles flickering in the early evening darkness. Scarecrows lean against fence posts and cornstalk bundles frame every doorway. The local bakery, Meredith's, fills the air with the scent of fresh apple cider donuts every morning. The hardware store sells more orange and black decorations than you can imagine. And the town square hosts a farmer's market every Saturday where vendors sell gourds. Honey and handmade Halloween crafts, it is perfect. Too perfect I did not notice this growing up. When you are born into something, you accept it as normal. The way Millbrook Falls celebrated Halloween seemed no different than any other small town in New England. But when I went away to college in Boston for 4 years, I gained perspective. I saw how other places celebrated October 31st. Parties, trick-or-treating, maybe a small parade or festival. Nothing like what we did. When I returned home last year after graduation, I saw Millbrook Falls with new eyes. The autumn perfection felt staged, as if the town was performing for an unseen audience. I noticed things I had overlooked my entire childhood. The way conversations would stop abruptly when certain topics came up. The identical wreaths that appeared on every single door on October 1st, not bought from any store but delivered anonymously overnight. The symbol carved into the base of the fountain in the town square. A strange spiral with 7 lines radiating from its center that no one ever talked about. And then there were the whispers. Not gossip, but actual whispers that seemed to come from nowhere when you walked alone at night. Soft voices speaking words you could almost but not quite understand, like a radio station just out of range. My mother noticed my noticing. She is a kind woman, my mother. With graying blonde hair she keeps in a practical bun and hands weathered from years of gardening. She teaches 3rd grade at Millbrook Elementary and has lived here all 52 years of her life. You are seeing it now, are you not? She asked me one evening in mid-October as we sat on the back porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Seeing what? I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. She was quiet for a long moment, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. The town. What it really is. What we really do here. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Mom, what are you talking about? She turned to look at me and I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. Fear. Deep, bone-settled fear that had been there so long it had become part of her. The parade. Reed, it is almost time for the parade. Of course I knew about the parade. I had participated in it every year since I was 5 years old. But I realized in that moment that I had never really questioned it. Never asked why we did things the way we did. Never wondered about the rules that governed every aspect of that night. There is something you need to see, my mother said, standing up. Come with me. I followed her inside and up to the attic, a space I had not visited in years. She pulled down the folding ladder and we climbed up into the dusty darkness. She switched on a bare bulb that cast harsh shadows across boxes of Christmas decorations and old furniture. She moved to the far corner and pulled out a wooden chest I had never seen before. It was old, very old, made of dark wood that was almost black with age. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, including that spiral with 7 radiating lines. My mother opened the chest carefully, reverently, and pulled out a book. It was not really a book in the traditional sense. It was more like a collection of pages, some parchment, some paper, some that looked like they might be animal hide, all bound together with leather straps. The cover was unmarked except for one word burned into the leather in an old-fashioned script. Rules. Every family in Millbrook Falls has one of these, my mother said quietly. They are passed down from generation to generation. Your father's family has had theirs since 1743. That is when the parade began. What is it? I asked, though my mouth had gone dry. Exactly what it says. The rules for the Halloween parade. The rules we must follow if we want to survive. She handed it to me and I opened it with trembling fingers. The pages were covered in different handwriting, different inks, different languages even. Some entries were in English, others in what looked like French or possibly an older form of English I could barely read. But the most recent entries, dating back about 50 years, were perfectly legible. I started reading and I felt my blood turn to ice. The rulebook was not organized in any logical way. It seemed to be a collection of observations, warnings, and explicit instructions accumulated over nearly 3 centuries. Some entries were just a single sentence. Others went on for pages, describing in horrifying detail what happened when someone broke a rule. But 4 rules appeared over and over again, written and rewritten by different hands across different decades, underlined, circled, emphasized in ways that made it clear they were the most important. The non-negotiable core of everything. I read them aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. Rule 1. Never break formation once the parade begins. Stay in your assigned position until the church bells ring 3 times. Rule 2. If someone offers you something during the parade, accept it with your left hand only and never look at their face. Rule 3. When the parade stops at the old fountain, do not drink or touch the water no matter how thirsty you become. Rule 4. Do not speak the names of the dead aloud during the parade, even if you hear them whispered around you. I looked up at my mother. What does this mean? Who are these rules for? Who enforces them? She took the book back from me gently as if it were made of glass. The rules are for us, Reed, for the living. As for who enforces them, she trailed off, looking at the small attic window where darkness had fully fallen. It is better if you do not think about that. Better if you just follow them. And if we do not? Her face went pale. There are consequences. Terrible consequences. You will see some of them written in there if you keep reading, but most of them we do not speak about. Cannot speak about. I spent the next 3 days reading that book cover to cover. What I found inside made me question everything I thought I knew about my hometown. The entries from the 1740s were written in cramped handwriting that was difficult to decipher. But I managed to piece together the story. Millbrook Falls was originally called Millbrook, just Millbrook, founded by a group of settlers who came up from Massachusetts. In the autumn of 1743, something happened. The entries did not specify what, but they described it as the agreement or the compact. Whatever this agreement was, it required the town to host a parade every October 31st. Not a celebration, but an obligation. A payment of sorts. One entry from 1744, written by someone named Josiah Millbrook, possibly the town founder, read, "We have made our bargain and must honor it lest we all perish. The parade must go forth each year on the night of Samhain, and all must participate according to the rules set forth. The price of our prosperity is this annual tribute, and though my heart rebels against it, my mind knows we have no choice." Tribute. That word appeared again and again throughout the centuries. The parade was a tribute, but to what? To whom? The book never said directly, but it hinted. The old ones. Those who were here first. The watchers beneath the hill. And the consequences of breaking the rules were documented in horrifying detail. In 1789, a man named Thomas Whitmore broke formation during the parade. He stepped out of line to retrieve his hat that had blown off in the wind. The entry, written by his widow, described how he simply vanished between one step and the next. He was there and then he was gone. His body was found 3 days later in the woods, but the description of what state it was in had been violently scratched out of the book, the paper torn and stained with what looked like old blood. In 1823, a woman named Sarah Brennan looked at the face of someone who offered her something during the parade. She accepted the offering with her right hand and made eye contact with the giver. She screamed, according to witnesses, a scream that lasted far longer than any human should be able to sustain. She was found the next morning at the fountain, her eyes open and staring, her mouth still open in that eternal scream. The town doctor declared her dead of fright, her heart simply stopped from terror. In 1891, a child touched the water at the fountain. Just touched it, dipped his fingers in. He began to drink from the fountain uncontrollably, unable to stop until his stomach ruptured. The entry describing this was written by the town doctor and was clinical in its horror. And in 1956, the most recent documented rule-breaking, a teenager named Daniel Forrester spoke the name of his dead grandfather during the parade. He said it without thinking, calling out Grandpa Joe when he thought he saw him in the crowd. Daniel was found the next morning having aged 70 years overnight, his body that of a 90-year-old man, though he was only 17. He died 2 days later, his mind gone, babbling about the spaces between and the ones who wait. I looked up at my mother after reading that last entry. This is insane. This cannot be real, but I knew it was. Deep down, in a place that predated logic and reason, I knew every word was true. It is time for you to take your place in the parade, my mother said. You are old enough now. You understand. And we need you, Reed. We all need each other. No one can opt out. Every person in Millbrook Falls must participate or the agreement is void. And if the agreement is void? She did not answer. She did not have to. The terror in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Before you continue with my story, I need to ask something of you. If this video is making you feel even a fraction of the unease I felt in that moment, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who loves a good horror story. Because what I am about to tell you gets so much worse and you are going to want to be here for it. Trust me. Parade Day. A spectacle of omen October 31st arrived with unseasonable warmth. The morning was bright and clear, the sky an impossible shade of blue that seemed wrong somehow, too vibrant, too perfect. The temperature climbed to nearly 70 degrees, and people walked around town in short sleeves commenting on how lucky we were with the weather. But I noticed that no one seemed actually happy about it. Their smiles were tight, forced. Their laughter sounded hollow. The parade was scheduled to begin at 8 p.m. just as true darkness fell. All day long the town prepared. Floats were assembled in the high school parking lot. Costumes were donned. The marching band practiced their songs, the same songs they played every single year. Songs I now recognized as being far older than they should be, melodies that predated modern music by centuries. I spent the morning at the town hall, where my assigned position was being finalized. Every person in Millbrook Falls, all 2,347 of us, had a specific role in the parade. Some marched, some rode on floats, some stood at designated points along the route, some operated lights and music. Everyone had a position, and everyone knew that deviation from that position meant consequences. My position was in the third row of marchers, 7 people back from the front of my section. I would be walking between Mrs. Henderson, the librarian, and Jamal, a guy I went to high school with who now worked at the gas station. We were all given placards with numbers on them, though I did not understand the significance of the numbers. Mine was 73. We were also given our costumes. Not costumes we chose, but costumes assigned to us. Mine was a simple black robe with a hood, similar to what a monk might wear. Others had more elaborate outfits. I saw people dressed as animals, as historical figures, as abstract concepts rendered in fabric and paint. But every costume looked old, really old, as if they had been worn by hundreds of people before us. At 6 p.m., we all gathered at the starting point, the north end of Main Street where it met the old cemetery. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if I was not so terrified. Mayor Blackwood, a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a politician's smile, stood before us all. But his smile was gone now, replaced by a grim solemnity I had never seen on his face. "Thank you all for being here," he said, his voice amplified by a microphone. "As we do every year, we gather to fulfill our obligation. You all know the rules. You have all read them. Tonight, I ask you to remember them. Follow them exactly. Do not deviate. Do not improvise. Do not test them." He paused, looking out over the assembled crowd. "For 282 years, Millbrook Falls has prospered. We have known peace and plenty. Our children have been healthy. Our harvests have been bountiful. Our businesses have thrived. This is because we honor the agreement. This is because we follow the rules." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but it sounded more like a prayer than enthusiasm. "Tonight, as darkness falls, we will march. We will perform our duties. And when the church bells ring 3 times, signaling the end, we will return to our homes, and we will not speak of what we saw or heard until another year has passed." He lowered the microphone and stepped back. Around us, the streetlights began to come on, but they were not the normal warm white of modern LED bulbs. They glowed a sickly green color that cast everything in an unsettling pallor. At exactly 8 p.m., a drum began to beat, deep, slow, rhythmic. It came from somewhere I could not identify, the sound seeming to emanate from the ground itself. The parade began. The first rows started moving, and I watched as the formation advanced. Everyone moved in perfect unison, their steps synchronized to that deep drum beat. As my section approached the starting line, I fell into step, keeping my position exactly as assigned. The moment I crossed into the parade route proper, I felt it. A change in the air, in the atmosphere, in reality itself. It was as if I had stepped through an invisible barrier into a different world that occupied the same space as the one I knew. The temperature dropped instantly, the unseasonable warmth vanishing as if it had never existed. My breath came out in visible puffs of mist. The sounds of the normal world, the distant traffic, the rustle of wind in trees, all of it faded, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by the drum and the shuffle of hundreds of feet. And I saw them. The spectators. They lined both sides of Main Street, standing perfectly still, watching us march. But they were not people from our town. They could not be. Their faces were wrong, the proportions slightly off in ways I could not quite define. Too narrow, too long, eyes set just a bit too far apart or too close together. They wore clothes from different eras, I saw. Victorian dresses next to colonial coats, next to clothing so old I could not even identify the period. And they never blinked. Not once. They just stared at us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I remembered the rule. Do not break formation. Stay in your assigned position. I kept walking, keeping my eyes forward, maintaining my place in line. Around me, I could hear others breathing heavily, fighting the same primal urge to run that I was experiencing. The floats rolled past, and I saw that they depicted scenes I did not remember from the preparation. One showed a forest with trees that seemed to move even though the float was stationary. Another displayed a house that was larger on the inside than the outside, its windows showing rooms that went back impossibly far. A third showed a sky filled with stars and constellations I did not recognize, patterns that hurt to look at directly. The marching band played their ancient songs, but I now heard lyrics I had never noticed before, words in languages that predated English, calling out to things that should not be named. We marched down Main Street, past the shops that were all dark now, their windows reflecting our procession but showing it slightly differently than it was. In the reflections, I saw things walking between us that were not there in reality. Tall figures, shadow shapes, things that moved in ways that violated physics. I kept my eyes forward. I kept my position. I followed the rules. Then, as we approached the intersection of Main and Birch, I saw someone standing in the parade route itself. Not on the sidewalk with the other spectators, but directly in our path. It was a woman in an old-fashioned dress, holding something in her outstretched hand. As I got closer, I saw it was a piece of candy, wrapped in orange paper. She was offering it to me. I remembered the rule. If someone offers you something during the parade, accept it with your left hand only and never look at their face. My heart hammering. I reached out with my left hand as I passed her. My fingers closed around the candy and it felt warm. Too warm. Almost uncomfortably hot. I kept my eyes averted, looking at her shoulder, her neck, anywhere but her face. But in my peripheral vision, I saw it. Her smile. It was too wide, stretching across her face in a way no human smile should. And her teeth, when she opened her mouth, were too numerous and too sharp. "Thank you," she whispered, and her voice sounded like wind through dead trees. I clutched the candy and kept walking, my hand trembling. Around me, others were having similar encounters. I saw Jamal accept something from a figure in a top hat. I saw Mrs. Henderson take what looked like a flower from a child who stood far too still to be alive. We continued down Main Street, the drum beating, the spectators watching, the impossible things happening at the edges of perception where reality grew thin, and then we reached the fountain. The old fountain stood in the town square, a structure that predated even the oldest buildings in Millbrook Falls. It was made of gray stone covered in moss and age, and it featured a statue at its center. A figure that was supposed to be an angel but looked more like something trying to be an angel. Its proportions slightly wrong, its face slightly inhuman. Water flowed from the statue's hands into the basin below. Clear water that caught the sickly green light and seemed to glow with an inner luminescence. The parade came to a halt at the fountain, everyone stopping in perfect unison as the drum went silent. We stood there, arranged in concentric circles around the square, all facing the fountain. This was always part of the parade, I knew. The stop at the fountain, a moment of silence. But I had never understood why, had never questioned it. Now, standing there in the oppressive quiet, I understood. This was a test. The water looked inviting, clear and cool and pure. After the march, after the tension and fear, my mouth was dry, my throat parched. The urge to step forward, to cup my hands in that water, to drink deeply, was almost overwhelming. I remembered the rule. When the parade stops at the old fountain, do not drink or touch the water, no matter how thirsty you become. I stood still, my hands clenched at my sides, fighting the compulsion. Around me, I could see others struggling with the same urge. People swaying slightly, leaning toward the fountain, their faces showing the physical effort it took to resist. And then I heard the whispers. They came from the water itself, or maybe from the statue, or maybe from somewhere beneath the fountain. Soft voices, dozens of them, hundreds of them, calling out names. Sarah, Michael, Elizabeth, Thomas. They were the names of the dead. I recognized some of them from the cemetery, from obituaries I had read, from stories my grandparents told. The voices were calling out to their relatives, their descendants, the people they had known in life. I heard my grandmother's voice. She had died when I was 12. A kind woman who always smelled like lavender. "Reed," she whispered from the fountain. "Reed, sweetheart, I am so thirsty. Could you bring me some water?" My eyes filled with tears. It sounded exactly like her. The same gentle tone, the same slight accent from her childhood in Quebec, the same love in her voice. "Reed," she said again, more urgently, "please, I am so thirsty. It has been so long. Just say my name and bring me the water. Say it. Say Grandma Elise." I clenched my jaw, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. I would not speak. I would not say her name, because the thing in the fountain was not my grandmother. It was something wearing her voice like a mask. The rule: do not speak the names of the dead aloud during the parade, even if you hear them whispered around you. Around the fountain, I saw others crying silently, tears streaming down their faces as they heard the voices of lost loved ones. An elderly man next to me shook with suppressed sobs as he heard what must have been his wife's voice. A young woman covered her mouth with both hands as if physically preventing herself from speaking. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, overlapping until they became a cacophony of the dead begging, pleading, demanding to be acknowledged. And then, suddenly, the drum beat again. Once, twice, 3 times. The whispers stopped instantly, cut off as if a switch had been thrown. The silence that followed was deafening. The parade began moving again, leaving the fountain behind. I did not look back, but I felt its presence like a weight between my shoulder blades. We continued through the town square, past the town hall, past the library, past the shops and restaurants. The spectators watched. The impossible floats rolled. The ancient songs played. I was exhausted, my legs aching, my mind reeling from what I had experienced. But I kept my position. I followed the rules. I did not break formation. We turned onto Church Street, approaching St. Michael's, the oldest church in Millbrook Falls. Built in 1745, its white steeple rose into the dark sky, and I could see the bell tower at its peak. This was where the parade ended. The church bells would ring 3 times and we would be released from our obligation. We would be free to go home, to sleep, to try to forget what we had seen and heard. The parade formed up in rows before the church, filling the street and the parking lot and the lawn. Everyone in position, everyone silent, everyone waiting. I checked my watch. It was 11:57 p.m. In 3 minutes, midnight would arrive and the bells would ring. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze, a voice calling out clearly in the silence. "Dad! Dad, is that you?" I turned my head, breaking the forward-facing rule for just a moment, and saw a young man, maybe 19 or 20, stepping out of formation. He was pointing at one of the spectators, an older man in the crowd. "Dad, you came back. Everyone said you were dead, but you came back." The young man started walking toward the spectator. His face lit up with joy and relief, but I could see what he could not. The thing he was calling Dad was not human. Its smile was too wide. Its movements were too fluid. Its eyes were too dark. "No," someone whispered behind me. "Oh God, no." The young man reached the spectator and embraced it. For a moment, nothing happened. And then the young man screamed. It was not a scream of pain or fear. It was a scream of realization, of understanding, of seeing something that broke his mind. He screamed and screamed and screamed, and the thing that wore his father's shape held him and would not let go. People looked away. Mayor Blackwood's face was ashen. But no one moved. No one broke formation, because the rules said we could not. Not until the bells rang. The young man collapsed, still screaming, his voice going hoarse and then silent, his mouth still open in that soundless cry. The thing that held him began to change, its human disguise melting away to reveal something underneath that I cannot describe, something that hurt to look at, something that existed in more dimensions than my eyes could process. And then, mercifully, the church bells began to ring. The first bell, everyone started moving immediately, breaking formation, running for their homes. I ran with them, my heart pounding, not looking back at the young man or the thing that held him. Dong, the second bell. The spectators were vanishing, fading like mist in sunlight, their two still forms dissolving into the darkness. The floats were crumbling, their impossible physics collapsing. Dong, the third bell. I reached my house, threw open the door, stumbled inside, and slammed it shut behind me. My mother was already there, her face pale, her hands shaking. "You followed the rules?" she asked urgently. "Yes," I gasped. "Yes, I followed them." She pulled me into a hug, holding me tight. "Thank God. Thank God." Through the window, I could see the street outside returning to normal. The green lights faded back to white. The oppressive silence lifted. The temperature rose. Reality settled back into place like a blanket being smoothed out. The Halloween parade was over for another year. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my window and the smell of coffee brewing downstairs. For a moment, I wondered if I had dreamed the entire thing. Maybe it was all some elaborate Halloween prank. Maybe the stress of moving back home had caused a psychotic break. But then I reached into my pocket and felt the piece of candy the woman in the old-fashioned dress had given me. I pulled it out and looked at it in the daylight. The orange wrapper was old, very old, made of paper that predated plastic wrappers by decades. And written on it in faded ink was a date, October 31st, 1887. I put the candy on my nightstand and went downstairs. My mother was at the kitchen table reading the Millbrook Falls Gazette, our local newspaper. She looked up when I entered. "Coffee?" she offered. "Please," I said, sitting down across from her. She poured me a cup and we sat in silence for a moment. Normal silence. Comfortable silence. The kind of silence that exists in the real world, not the oppressive void of the parade. "The Parker boy," she said finally. "Jeremy Parker. He is in the hospital. They say he had some kind of seizure during the parade. He is in a coma." The young man who broke formation, who called out to what he thought was his dead father. "Will he wake up?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. My mother's face was grim. "The doctors say probably not. And if he does," she trailed off, not needing to finish. "If he woke up, he would not be the same. How could he be after what he had seen, after what had touched him? Every year," she said quietly, "someone breaks a rule. Usually they are young, like Jeremy, or they are new to town and do not understand. Sometimes they are old and their minds wander and they forget, and every year there are consequences." "How do you live with this?" I asked. "How does anyone live with this?" She looked at me with tired eyes. "Because the alternative is worse. Much worse. The agreement keeps us safe, Reed. It keeps us prosperous. It keeps our children healthy and our town thriving. The price we pay once a year is terrible, yes, but it is better than the price we would pay if the agreement was broken." "What would happen if the agreement was broken?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "In 1743, there was a town 50 miles north of here called Braxton. It was the same size as Millbrook, maybe bigger. They were offered the same agreement we were. They refused. What happened to them? No one knows. The town just disappeared. Not slowly, not gradually, overnight. Every building, every person, every animal, gone. The only thing left was the land, and even that was wrong. Poisoned somehow. Nothing grows there even now, almost 300 years later. Just bare earth and stones and silence. She looked at me and I saw in her eyes the weight of generations of fear and acceptance. That is why we follow the rules, Reed. That is why we march in the parade. That is why we do not question, because the alternative is not death. It is erasure. It is being unmade from existence itself. I spent the next few days trying to return to normal life. I went to my job at the local bookstore. I met friends for coffee. I helped my mother with her garden. But everything felt different now. The veil had been lifted and I could not unsee what I had seen. I noticed things I had never paid attention to before. The way people in Millbrook Falls never talked about certain topics. The way the town's prosperity seemed almost supernatural and how consistent it was. How businesses never failed. How crime was virtually non-existent. How even in national recessions we thrived. I noticed the symbols carved into old buildings. That spiral with 7 radiating lines appearing again and again. I noticed that every longtime resident of Millbrook Falls had a certain look in their eyes. A wariness, an acceptance of something terrible. And I noticed the disappearances. Not dramatic ones, not missing person cases that made the news, but small erasures. A name in an old yearbook that no one remembered belonging to anyone. A house that people walked past without seeing. Gaps in the collective memory that no one questioned. The agreement was not just about the parade. The parade was just the visible part, the annual ritual. But the agreement permeated everything, woven into the fabric of the town itself. One evening, about a week after Halloween, I went to visit the town library. Mrs. Henderson, who had marched beside me in the parade, was working the desk. She smiled at me warmly. The same smile she had always given me since I was a child coming in for story time. "Reed, good to see you. What brings you in today?" "I wanted to look at the town history collection," I said. "The old records." Her smile faltered slightly. "Any particular reason?" "Just curious. I want to understand where we came from." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Basement archives." "But Reed, be careful what you go looking for. Some knowledge has a weight to it." I spent hours in the basement poring over old documents, town records, personal journals that had been donated to the library, and I found references to the agreement scattered throughout, though never stated explicitly. It was always hinted at, talked around, referred to obliquely. But one journal, written by a woman named Martha Colby in 1802, was more direct than the others. She wrote, "We are not a town of people. We are a town of offerings. Each of us is a sacrifice waiting to happen, bought and paid for by our ancestors who chose survival over freedom. We live well because we are livestock that has not yet been slaughtered. And the day we stop performing our appointed roles is the day we discover what we have always truly been, food for things that hunger in the dark." I closed the journal, my hands shaking. The words resonated with a horrible truth. That night I had a dream. Or maybe it was not a dream. Maybe it was something else, a vision or a message or a warning. I stood in the town square, but it was different. The buildings were gone. The roads were gone. In their place was a forest, ancient and primordial. Trees so old they seemed to have existed since the dawn of time. And in the center of the clearing where the fountain would one day stand, there was a hole in the ground. Not a well or a pit, but a hole in reality itself. A wound in the world that pulsed with a sickly light. Things moved in that hole. Things that were too large to fit inside it but did anyway, defying the laws of space and dimension. I could not see them clearly, but I felt their presence like a physical weight pressing down on me. And then I heard a voice, not in my ears, but directly in my mind. "We were here first. We were here before the trees, before the earth cooled, before time had meaning. You are the intruders. You are the infection. But we made a bargain with your kind, a compact sealed in blood and fear. You perform your little ritual, you make your little offerings, you follow your little rules, and we allow you to continue existing in this place that is ours. We allow you to build your houses and raise your children and pretend you are anything other than temporary guests in our domain." The voice was not angry or cruel. It was matter of fact, stating simple truths the way one might describe the weather. The parade is a reminder, a performance for our entertainment and your humiliation, a demonstration that you understand your place, that you remember who you belong to. I wanted to run, to wake up, to escape. But I could not move. Some of you resist. Some of you test the boundaries. Some of you speak names you should not speak or touch water. You should not touch or break formation you should not break. These are the ones we take. These are the ones who remind the rest of you what disobedience costs. The hole pulsed, and for just a moment I saw into it. I saw Jeremy Parker, the young man from the parade. Not in a hospital bed, but suspended in a space that should not exist. Still screaming that silent scream, trapped in a moment that would last forever. I saw others too, hundreds of them, thousands. Every person who had ever broken a rule in Millbrook Falls, going back centuries, all of them trapped in that impossible space, experiencing their own personal eternities of horror. You will continue the tradition, the voice said. You will teach your children as you were taught. You will follow the rules as your parents followed them, because the alternative is not death. The alternative is this, forever. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. Sunlight was streaming through my window. It was morning. I was safe, but I knew the dream was not just a dream. It was a message, a warning, a reminder of what I was part of, what I would always be part of as long as I lived in Millbrook Falls. I got out of bed and went to the window, looking out at my peaceful town. People were walking their dogs. Kids were heading to school. The morning was clear and beautiful, and I realized the horrible truth: I could never leave. Not really. Oh, I could physically move away like I had for college, but I would always come back. The agreement was not just made by the founders of Millbrook Falls. It was renewed every year by every person who participated in the parade. By marching, by following the rules, by accepting our role, we were signing the contract again and again. We were bound to this place. We were part of it, and it was part of us. Over the following months, I tried to adjust to this knowledge. I went through the motions of normal life. I worked, I socialized. I dated a girl from the next town over. Though I never told her the truth about Millbrook Falls, how could I? Who would believe it? But I also started preparing. I read the rulebook cover to cover multiple times, memorizing every entry, every warning, every documented consequence. I talked to the older residents, the ones who had been through dozens of parades, learning their wisdom and their survival strategies. Mr. Peterson, who ran the hardware store and was 83 years old, told me, "The key is acceptance, Reed. Fighting it only makes it harder. The ones who struggle, the ones who resist, they are the ones who break. You have to make peace with what we are and what we do. It is not pleasant, but it is survival." Mrs. Chen at the Chinese restaurant, who had moved to Millbrook Falls from San Francisco 40 years ago, said, "I thought about leaving many times in those first few years. But where would I go? What would I do? Here I have a good life. My children are healthy. My business thrives. The price we pay once a year is steep, yes, but it is one day out of 365. The other 364 days are pretty good." I noticed she did not mention what happened to people who tried to leave permanently. I did not ask. As October approached again, I felt the familiar dread settling over the town. Conversations became more hushed. People looked over their shoulders more often. The decorations went up right on schedule, identical wreaths appearing on every door overnight. And I understood now what I had not understood before. This was not just tradition. This was preparation. This was the town collectively bracing itself for what was coming. 2 weeks before Halloween, the town council held a mandatory meeting in the high school gymnasium. Every resident was required to attend. Mayor Blackwood stood at the podium, his face drawn and tired. As we approached the 283rd annual parade, he said, "I want to remind everyone of the importance of following the rules. Last year we lost Jeremy Parker to carelessness. The year before we lost Sarah Brennan to distraction. The year before that Michael Torres to pride. We cannot afford these losses. We cannot afford the instability they create." He paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. "Every person here has a role to play. Every person here is essential to maintaining the agreement. If you are uncertain about your position, speak to your section leader. If you are unclear about the rules, consult your family's book. If you are afraid, talk to your neighbors. We are all in this together. We survive together or we fall together." After the meeting, I approached Mayor Blackwood. Up close, I could see the toll his position had taken on him. He had been mayor for 20 years, which meant he had overseen 20 parades, 20 nights of horror, 20 opportunities for something to go catastrophically wrong. Mayor Blackwood, I said, can I ask you something? He looked at me with weary eyes. You want to know if there is a way out? If there is a way to break the agreement without being destroyed? Is there? He was quiet for a long moment. People have tried over the years. Various attempts to outsmart it, to find loopholes, to negotiate different terms. None have succeeded. The agreement is absolute. It was made by our ancestors, and we are bound by their choice. That does not seem fair. He laughed bitterly. Fair? Read, fairness has nothing to do with it. The things we made the agreement with do not care about fairness. They care about entertainment and tribute and maintaining their claim to this land. We are the interlopers here. We are the ones who came to a place that was already occupied and tried to build a town. The only reason we were allowed to do so was because we agreed to pay the price. What are they? I asked. The things beneath the hill. The old ones, the Watchers. What are they really? Mayor Blackwood shook his head. I do not know. I do not think anyone knows, not really. They are older than humanity. They exist in ways we cannot comprehend. They are patient and powerful and utterly alien. Beyond that, he shrugged. Does it matter what they are? All that matters is that they are, and we have to live with them. He put a hand on my shoulder. You're a smart young man, Reed, smarter than most. But do not let that intelligence tempt you into thinking you can outsmart this situation. You cannot. The best thing you can do is accept it, follow the rules, and live the good life that Millbrook Falls provides. That is what your parents did. That is what their parents did. That is what you must do. He walked away, leaving me standing alone in the empty gymnasium. Now I know some of you watching this are probably thinking I should have left, that I should have packed my bags and gotten out of Millbrook Falls as fast as possible. And maybe you are right. Maybe that is what a smart person would have done. But here is something I have not told you yet. Something I discovered when I tried to do exactly that. 2 days after talking to Mayor Blackwood, I packed a suitcase. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell anyone. I just got in my car at 3 a.m. intending to drive to Boston and never come back. I made it to the town limits. There is a sign there, leaving Millbrook Falls, come back soon, with a painted autumn leaf border. I drove past that sign and my car just stopped. The engine died, the electronics shut off, everything went dark and silent. And then I heard the whispers. The same whispers from the fountain during the parade. Dozens of voices, hundreds of voices, all saying the same thing. The agreement is binding. The agreement is eternal. You belong to Millbrook Falls. Millbrook Falls belongs to us. You cannot leave. You will never leave. My car started again on its own. The wheel turned without me touching it, and I was driven back into town, back to my house, back to my room. When my mother found me the next morning sitting on my bed staring at nothing, she just hugged me and said, I know, sweetheart. I tried to leave too when I was your age, we all do, and we all learned the same lesson. So no, I could not leave. I was trapped like everyone else in Millbrook Falls, trapped by an agreement I never made, bound by rules I never agreed to, paying a price for prosperity I never asked for. Before I continue with what happened next, I need you to do something for me. If this story is resonating with you, if it is making you think about the hidden costs of comfort and safety, then leave a comment below. Tell me, would you have followed the rules? Would you have stayed in Millbrook Falls, accepting the annual horror in exchange for a good life? Or would you have kept trying to escape, even knowing what I just told you? I genuinely want to know. And while you are down there, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Halloween arrived again. This was my second parade. My first since truly understanding what it was. The dread I felt was different from the previous year. Last time I had been confused and frightened. This time I was resigned and terrified. I knew exactly what was coming. The day proceeded as it always did. Clear and perfect. Too perfect. The temperature warm and pleasant until the parade began and reality shifted. I took my position in the third row, 7th person back. Mrs. Henderson stood to my left again. Jamal stood to my right. We nodded at each other, a silent acknowledgement of shared burden. At 8 p.m. the drum began to beat. We marched. The spectators appeared, lining the streets with their 2 still forms and 2 wrong faces. The floats rolled past with their impossible cargo. The ancient songs played. I kept my eyes forward. I kept my position. I followed the rules. A figure approached me offering something. I accepted it with my left hand without looking at their face. It was a small stone, smooth and warm, with that spiral symbol carved into its surface. We continued to the fountain. We stopped. The silence fell. The whispers began. This time I heard my father's voice. He had died when I was 8, a car accident on a rainy night. "Reed," he whispered from the fountain. "Son, I miss you so much. I miss the life I should have had. Please just say my name just once. Say Dad. Let me hear you call me Dad one more time." Tears streamed down my face, but I said nothing. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth would crack. I would not speak. I would not say his name. The drum beat 3 times. We moved on. We marched through the town, following the route I now knew by heart. Past the places where reality grew thin. Past the points where the agreement was strongest. And finally, we approached the church. We formed up in rows, waiting for midnight, waiting for the bells that would release us. I checked my watch. 7:58 p.m., and then I heard something that made my heart stop. A child's voice, small and frightened. "Mommy? Mommy, where are you?" I turned my head slightly and saw a little girl, maybe 5 years old, wandering out of formation. She was looking around frantically, clearly separated from her mother in the crowd. "Mommy?" she called again, her voice rising in panic. One of the spectators turned toward her, a thing wearing the shape of a woman in an old-fashioned dress. It smiled at the child with too many teeth. "There you are, sweetie," the thing said in a perfect imitation of maternal warmth. "Come here to Mommy." The little girl started walking toward it. I broke formation. I did not think. I just moved. I ran to the little girl and scooped her up, turning away from the spectator. The child screamed and struggled, reaching for the thing that wore her mother's voice. "Let me go. That is my mommy." "That is not your mother," I said urgently, carrying her back toward the formation. "That is not your mother." I searched the crowd frantically and spotted a woman, a real woman, her face stricken with terror. "Emily!" she screamed. "Emily!" I handed the child to her mother, who clutched her daughter and sobbed with relief. And then I realized what I had done. I had broken formation. I had left my assigned position. I had violated Rule 1. The drum stopped beating. The entire parade went silent. Every person, every spectator, every impossible thing, all of them turned to look at me. Mayor Blackwood's voice carried across the suddenly still air. "Oh God, Reed, what have you done?" The church bells began to ring, but they were different this time. Wrong. Instead of the clear tones I had heard before, they sounded discordant, broken, like bells cracking as they rang. Dong. The first bell. The spectators did not vanish. They moved closer, tightening the circle around us. Dong. The second bell. Reality did not solidify. Instead, it grew thinner, more transparent. I could see through the buildings to the impossible spaces beyond. Dong, the third bell. But it was not over. The bells kept ringing. 4, 5, 6, 7. With each ring, the world became less real. The buildings faded like watercolors in rain. The ground beneath my feet felt insubstantial, as if I might fall through it at any moment. And then I was somewhere else. Not the street. Not the church. Not Millbrook Falls. I stood in that clearing from my dream, the ancient forest surrounding me, the hole in reality pulsing in the center. But this time I was not alone. Figures surrounded me, not the spectators from the parade, but something older, something more fundamental. They had shapes, but the shapes hurt to look at. Geometries that should not exist. Forms that folded in on themselves in ways that violated every law of physics. "You broke the rules," they said, their voices overlapping until they became a single terrible harmony. "You left your position. You interfered with our collection." "She was a child," I said, my voice shaking but defiant. "I could not let you take her." The agreement does not make exceptions for children. The agreement does not care about your morality or your compassion. The agreement is absolute. One of the figures moved closer, and I could feel its presence like heat from a furnace. "You will face the consequences of your violation. You will join the others in the space between, experiencing your punishment for eternity." I thought about Jeremy Parker, still screaming his silent scream. I thought about all the others trapped in that impossible place, paying forever for their momentary lapses. "No," I said. The figures stopped. "No, I will not accept that. I broke the rule to save a child. If that violates your precious agreement, then your agreement is wrong. The silence that followed was absolute and crushing. You dare to judge us? You dare to call our compact wrong? Yes, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Yes, I do. You have kept this town hostage for almost 3 centuries. You have demanded tribute and performance and absolute obedience, and for what? So you can be entertained? So you can feel powerful? You are bullies. Ancient, powerful bullies, but bullies nonetheless. I expected to be destroyed instantly. I expected to be torn apart or erased from existence or trapped forever in that screaming space. But instead, the figures laughed. It was not cruel laughter. It was surprised laughter, almost delighted. Finally, they said. Finally, one of you shows some spirit. Do you know how long it has been since anyone challenged us? How tedious it has become? Watching you all shuffle through your little parade year after year, following every rule perfectly out of fear. I was stunned. What? The agreement was never meant to last forever, they said. It was meant to last until one of you was brave enough to challenge it. Until one of you valued something more than your own survival. Until one of you broke the rules for the right reason. They moved around me in patterns I could not track, their forms shifting and changing. We made the same agreement with dozens of towns, hundreds of settlements across this land and others. Most of them failed immediately, destroyed by their own greed or fear or inability to cooperate. A few like Millbrook Falls succeeded too well. They followed the rules so perfectly, so absolutely that they forgot why they were following them. They forgot that the agreement was a test, not a sentence. A test? I repeated, my mind reeling. A test of character. A test of growth. We are old, yes. We are powerful, yes. But we are not evil, though you might think so. We were here first in this land, and when your kind came, we could have destroyed you all. But we were curious. We wanted to see if humanity could learn, could evolve, could become something more than scared animals cowering before greater powers. The figures paused, and when they spoke again, their voices were softer. The agreement offered safety and prosperity in exchange for obedience. But true growth, true evolution, requires the courage to defy even the most terrifying authority when something more important is at stake. You passed the test, Reed. After 282 years, Millbrook Falls finally passed the test. I could barely breathe. What happens now? Now the agreement ends. Not in destruction, but in graduation. Millbrook Falls will continue to prosper, but not because of our intervention, because you have earned it. Because you have learned the most important lesson, that some things, like protecting the innocent, are worth more than safety, worth more than comfort, worth more than survival itself. The impossible space around me began to dissolve. The forest faded. The hole sealed itself. The parade will continue, they said as I felt myself being pulled back to reality. But it will be a true celebration now, not a tribute. A reminder of what you learned, not what you fear. And the rules will remain, but only as guidelines, as wisdom. Not as absolute laws enforced by cosmic punishment. Wait, I called out. What about the others? The ones who broke the rules before? Jeremy Parker and all the rest? There was a pause. They broke the rules out of carelessness, out of weakness, out of self-interest. You broke the rule out of courage and compassion. That is the difference. They will remain where they are, as reminders and as warnings. But no new names will join them. The collection is ended. And then I was back on Church Street, standing before the church, the entire town watching me. The bells had stopped ringing. The spectators were gone. Reality was solid again. Mayor Blackwood approached me slowly, his face a mixture of terror and confusion. Reed, are you still here? I am still here, I said, my voice hoarse. But you broke formation. You violated the agreement. How are you not? The agreement is over, I said. Or at least it has changed. We passed the test. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Disbelief, hope, fear, all of it mixed together. Over the following days, weeks and months, Millbrook Falls slowly began to understand what had happened. The oppressive dread that always hung over October began to lift. The symbols carved into buildings faded, not destroyed but losing their power, becoming merely historical curiosities. The fountain in the town square still stood, but the water no longer whispered names. The next Halloween, we held a parade. But it was different. People chose their costumes. Children trick-or-treated without fear. There were still rules, yes, but they were sensible rules about safety and organization, not cosmic edicts enforced by ancient powers. Jeremy Parker woke from his coma 3 days after that parade. The doctors called it a miracle. He had no memory of what happened to him, and we did not tell him. Some burdens are not meant to be shared. The prosperity of Millbrook Falls continued, but now people understood that it came not from supernatural intervention, but from hard work, cooperation, and community. The town thrived not because of what we feared, but because of what we valued: each other, our children, our future. I stayed in Millbrook Falls, not because I was trapped, but because I chose to. I had broken the chains that bound us, and in doing so I had found my place. My purpose. I am 30 years old now. I have a wife, Sarah, who moved here from Portland and whom I told everything before we married. She chose to stay anyway. We have a daughter, Emily, named after the little girl I saved that night. She is 3 years old and loves Halloween with the pure, untainted joy that children should have. Every October 31st, I stand in the town square and tell the story of the old parade to anyone who will listen. The story of how we lived in fear for nearly 3 centuries. The story of how we followed rules without questioning them. The story of how one moment of courage and compassion changed everything. Some people think I am exaggerating. They say the old stories are just legends, that the parade was always just a quaint tradition that got a bit too serious. They do not believe in ancient powers or cosmic agreements. I let them think that. It is easier that way, and maybe in a sense they are right. Maybe the real power was never in the things beneath the hill. Maybe the real power was always in us, in our choice to be either slaves to fear or brave enough to do what was right. But sometimes, on quiet October nights, I walk past the old fountain, and sometimes, just for a moment, I think I hear whispers. Not threatening, not demanding, just watching, waiting, curious about what we will do next. And I smile, because I know that whatever comes, we will face it together. Not as frightened offerings, but as a community that learned the hardest lesson of all. That true strength comes not from perfect obedience, but from the courage to break the rules when breaking them is right. I am writing this 7 years after the night I broke formation. It is October 28th, 2025, and Millbrook Falls is preparing for its 290th Halloween celebration. But what we prepare for now is nothing like what came before. The town council, under new leadership after Mayor Blackwood retired, commissioned a monument in the town square. It stands beside the fountain, a stone pillar with 4 plaques. Each plaque displays one of the old rules, not as commands but as lessons. Know your place, but be willing to leave it when something more important is at stake. Accept what is offered with humility, but keep your eyes open to the truth. Resist temptations that would destroy you, no matter how appealing they seem. Honor the dead by living well, not by living in their shadow. At the base of the monument is an inscription, in memory of all who paid the price of the agreement, and in honor of those brave enough to end it. My daughter Emily, now 10 years old, asked me about the monument last week. "Daddy, what was the agreement?" I knelt down beside her, looking into her bright, curious eyes, and I told her the truth. Not a sanitized version, not a fairy tale, but the real story of what Millbrook Falls had been and what it had become. People did terrible things out of fear, I told her, but they also survived and they built something good here. And when the time came to choose between that survival and doing what was right, someone finally chose right. That is what matters. Was it you, Daddy? She asked. Are you the one who chose right? I'm the one who broke the rule, I said. But I am not a hero, sweetie. I am just someone who could not stand by and watch a little girl be hurt. Anyone else would have done the same thing. No, said a voice behind me. I turned to see old Mrs. Henderson, now retired from the library, leaning on her cane. No, Reed, that is where you are wrong. Many people would have wanted to do the same thing, but only you actually did it. That is what makes the difference. She walked away, leaving me and Emily alone by the monument. The truth is, I do not know if I am a hero or just someone who happened to be in the right place at the right moment with just enough courage to act. I do not know if the things beneath the hill truly released us or if we released ourselves by finally refusing to be afraid. What I do know is this: Millbrook Falls is free now. Free to prosper or struggle on its own merits. Free to succeed or fail based on our choices, not on some ancient compact. Free to be a real town full of real people living real lives. And that freedom, I think, is worth any price. This Halloween, we will march in the parade. Not because we have to, but because we want to. Not in fear, but in celebration. Not as offerings, but as a community that remembers its past and chooses its future. The rules still exist. They are still important, but now they serve us instead of us serving them. And sometimes late at night, when I walk alone through the autumn darkness, I feel that presence still watching. Those ancient powers that made the agreement with our ancestors. They are still there, still aware, still curious. But they are not our masters anymore, they are just witnesses to what we will become. So that is my story. The story of how my town's Halloween parade had ancient rules, and how I broke the most important one to save a child. The story of how fear can bind a community for centuries, and how courage can set it free. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Thank you for taking this journey with me through the darkest night of my life and the moment that defined who I would become. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been part of a tradition you did not understand? Have you ever followed rules without questioning why? Have you ever had to choose between your own safety and doing what is right? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own stories of mysterious traditions or unexplained rules in your community. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it gave you chills or made you question the comfortable lies we tell ourselves, then hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let us build a community of people who are brave enough to question, bold enough to challenge, and courageous enough to break the rules when breaking them is right. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and remember, some rules are meant to be broken. This is Reed, from Millbrook Falls, Vermont, signing off.